cause of much hardship in this world is simply misunderstandings. We had one of these, I warned you, so I was doing this. We had one of these at our house recently. It's been one of those times when I just worked a couple of really long days in a row, and Lisa and the kids had seen very little of me. So as we went to bed the night before what was to be my day off, Lisa said to me, "I'm just looking forward to curling up with you on the couch tomorrow." I thought, well, that was really nice. They want me to be home. So the next morning I got up, and since I felt like I'd been sort of shirking my duties around the house, although I went to clean the kitchen, and then I helped bring a load of firewood up, and then I played with Ian and Elizabeth for a while, and then I went and cleaned up the living room, and I did this all day. I didn't go run any errands. I stayed home all day, exactly what I thought was wanted. And you caught the punchline already. I didn't know what to do. I got to the end of the day, and I was wondering why Lisa looked a little disappointed, and I realized that she had said, "I want to sit on the couch with you." And all day long, I had run around and cared for the house and cared for the home and the family, but I hadn't actually sat down on the couch for even 5 minutes. She had said it. It wasn't her problem. It was mine. I hadn't heard it. And we run a danger as we listen to Jesus this morning of the same thing happening to us. We may not hear what Jesus is saying. So I think it pays for us to slow down a little bit and actually hear what Jesus is saying. Jesus says to us, "Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect." Now we, being modern Western people, think of something perfect as something that needs no further alteration. When the picture is perfect, you put it in its frame and hang it on the wall. When something is perfect, you put it under glass and admire it because you don't want to add anything or take anything away, or it stops being perfect. We think of perfection as a static kind of quality. But what Jesus actually says here in the original is a little different. And I wish they hadn't said the word be, because again, we think of being as something that doesn't change. I wish they had interpreted it the way it kind of reads in the Greek, which is where Jesus says, "Become perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect." It's kind of an active quality. It assumes there will be growth and change. Now this is interesting because, of course, as Lutherans, especially if you went through your catechism, you probably almost have memorized Ephesians 2:8-9, right? You have been saved by grace through faith. This is not your own doing. It is a gift of God, so no one can boast, or something like that, depending on the translation. So we tend to hear Jesus say, "Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect," and we think to ourselves, he's exaggerating. No one can be perfect. That way we all know we need grace. I feel comfortable again. But Jesus is not saying that. He's actually saying, do this stuff. Do this stuff I'm saying. So that's the first way we could mishear Jesus as he speaks to us in today's text. Not that we're going to be perfect, but we're supposed to be working at becoming more like our Heavenly Father. The other thing we could hear wrong this morning is when we hear Jesus say something like, "You have heard it said this, but I say to you this," we kind of hear him as saying, ignore the first half of this sentence and do the second half. The second half is more important, or it overwashes and supersedes, it puts away the first half of the sentence. But again, that's not what Jesus is saying. This is exactly the way rabbis talk all the time. Jesus is not saying anything with which his original Jewish hearers would have been unfamiliar. He says, rabbis do this all the time. You've heard it said this, I say to you this. This is a common teaching technique. Jesus is not negating the law. Or else he wouldn't have said, in verse 5:17, back up if you read your Bible, "I came not to abolish the law and the prophets, but to fulfill." What's really interesting to me is that the word they translate as fulfill there, the same word they translate as perfect at the end of today's reading. Come not to abolish the law and the prophets, but to make them perfect. To show what they were supposed to be about to begin with. And Jesus needed to do this because by the time he arrived on the scene, there were two problems besetting the people of God as they sought to live in accordance with God's law. The first of these was that they lived in what sociologists call a shame-honor culture. It's a little different than our culture. Our culture is driven by guilt. Some of you are laughing because you know that's especially true in your personal lives. But our culture is driven by guilt. If we think we've done something wrong, we expect to be eaten up inside about it, not on the outside. In a shame-honor culture, it's the external consequences that matter the most, that tell you when you've done something wrong. The closest we have to this is for those of us who've read or seen mafia movies, this kind of thing. The mafia culture that's portrayed in those movies is very much a shame-honor culture. The Godfather just wants some respect. That's what a shame-honor culture is about. It's about respect. And this was the culture that Jesus was born into and living in the midst of. Do you know, in the culture that Jesus lived in Jewish first century culture, if you injured a neighbor, they could sue you on 5 principles. For 5 reasons they could sue you. Hurts or damages, their need for healing, their pain, their loss of work, and the way they were insulted by what you did. This is the culture, and this is the law. Everyone knows the law. Everyone's keeping the law. We're trying to keep the law. Jesus is pointing out to them something bigger than that. And just so they can't miss it, he starts with a really offensive one. He says, if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. Present to them the other so they can slap it. Now most people who are right-handed can slap somebody like this. They're going to get hit on the left cheek. The only way you get slapped on the right cheek is if somebody's backhand. It's an act of contempt. They don't even care enough about you to slap you properly. Now, if you get backhanded by someone, there's not going to be much pain, there's not going to be much damage, there's not going to be much loss of work, but there's going to be a huge insult given to you. Jesus is saying to them who are listening, and us, not that it wasn't wrong that you got slapped. Not that the insult wasn't genuine, but that you need, as the wrong party, to let that go. You need to let that go. Give to them your other cheek as well. There was another problem besetting the people of God if they tried to keep God's law, and that was excessive legalism about the law. It wasn't that they were trying to be faithful. They were very well intentioned. But for instance, honor the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Well, how much could you do on the Sabbath day before it became work? They have long debates and discussions about this. Do you know that if you carried more food with you than the weight of a dried fig, you were working on the Sabbath? If you wrote with more ink than it took to write the alphabet one time, you were working. If you took too many steps, you were working. The question had not become, what does the law teach us about who we are as a people of God? The question had become, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? It obscured both of these things, the shame-honor culture and the excessive legalism about the law, obscured the main purpose of the law. When was the law given? At Sinai. And why does God tell us the law is given? So that I can be their God and they can be my people. The law is given so that a relationship can exist. And this is why we must set aside our legalism. We must stop keeping score of our hurts. That's why we must let go of the insult that has been paid to us, even when the insult is genuine. Because if we hold on to the insult and our sense of hurt and our sense of entitlement and our pride, if we say, I will forgive until this, that, and that happens, there can be no relationship restored between us and the other person. And most importantly, that's not how God restores relationships. God didn't owe us the cross. God didn't have to give His only begotten Son so that we might have life eternal. God let go of the insult to His honor that our ignoring His law caused. He didn't say tit for tat. He said, while they were yet sinners, I will give myself for them. We are to grow and become more perfect. Become more like our God, so that our relationships can be restored. I especially learned this from another situation in my life. I have a brother who struggles with addiction. I'm sure he'd be okay with me telling his story. He's happy if anyone can benefit from his story. And back when Lisa and I were going through graduate school, money's always tight when you're a student. We were on our second go-round for graduate school, and my brother kind of got in a bad way and needed some money to keep him from getting out on the street. So I took some of my student loan money and gave it to him as he swore up and down that he would repay me. And of course he did. Later, years later, when my brother finally started to get his life together and wanted to come back and be part of the family, what kept him away for a while was knowing that this debt hung between us. And to be perfectly honest, he probably was legitimate in feeling that way. It took me a very long time to stop being angry about that debt. It took me a long time to stop feeling ashamed that I hadn't protected my family better and cared for my wife and our children who were yet to be born. But a lot of prayer, a lot of grace, undeserved grace, I got to that place so that when He came and was able actually to be with us again, there could truly be no vestige of that resentment left in me, and He could truly feel welcome home. Who is God calling you to forgive? What insult to your honor, to your pride, do you have to let go of for a relationship in your life to be restored? God let go of everything so He could have a relationship with us. Now that we've heard the word of our salvation, it is up to us to become perfect as our Father in heaven is perfect. Pray that God will finish now His new creation. We will be pure and spotless, as we just sang, so that someday we may cast our crowns before Him, lost in wonder, love, and praise. To Him be all glory and honor now and forever. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.